Accountability, discussing the different types of accountability and how these play out in South Carolina or my local context. Definition of accountability, an umbrella term that refers to educators acting in accordance with how the public has determined they are to act and to achieve what they are expected to achieve. So again, as the schools being an instrument of public policy, we are expected to perform the way that they've determined that we are to perform, and that public is represented largely by the government in system accountability, in which the system is responsible for the results of the students. This started, of course, in 1994 with the reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which was an act initially started as improving America's schools. Now, accountability consequences were increased significantly in 2001 with this reauthorization, known as the No Child Left Behind, where the goal in this was to close the achievement gap between poor and minority students and their more advantaged peers. Of course, all the schools were supposed to be proficient by 2013-2014, and when this did not happen, the schools were expected to maintain an AYP that kept track of those goals to get to that level of proficiency that they were looking for. Some standards that were created through this was Title I funding and highly qualified teacher. Title I funding being that this is federal funding provided to the schools to educate disadvantaged children and highly qualified, where every teacher in a core content area working in a public school had to be highly qualified, which means that this teacher is certified and demonstrated proficiency in his or her subject matter. Now, because No Child Left Behind was more of a strong-armed policy where the consequences were more of a punishment, there was a lot of standardized testing through this, tripled in the time that it was there. Intense stress felt by the students and teachers from this based on those test scores. And so therefore that drove the focus of teaching being spent more teaching to the test and not to the content that the teachers felt like the students may benefit more from. Of course, one of the primary inadequacies of No Child Left Behind was that it did fail to provide the resources needed for these achievements to be gained. This predicated into the Every Student Succeeds Act President Obama signed in 2015, again a reauthorization of the ESEA, and it built on key areas of progress in No Child Left Behind. For example, today's graduation rates are higher than they've ever been before, and dropout rates are at historic lows. This gave less federal information and more leeway to the states, where the states can pick their own goals, both a long-term goal and a smaller interim goal. However, the goals still must address proficiency on testing, English language proficiency, and graduation rates. And they must set an expectation that all groups that are furthest behind close gaps in achievements and graduation rates. Individual accountability is one where the student or the teachers are the ones that are providing the accountability, or they are the ones that are accountable for the learning. For the students, this may mean having to pass a test to demonstrate they're ready to move on from one grade to the next, or to leave the educational system by passing a certifying credential. A high school graduation test is a perfect example of this. However, those are fading out now, where more of this accountability seems to be going more towards the teachers when we're talking about individual accountability. This starts off first and foremost by licensure and testing. And then in South Carolina, this is an adept or pastee policy, a South Carolina approved model of teacher evaluation, and this just provides assurance that schools are staffed with competent professionals who possess the knowledge and skills necessary to meet the needs of all students. First year teachers have an induction year where they're mentored. Second year they do a formal evaluation in which they go through 6 different evaluations. And if they pass that, they go into a continuing contract where their performance, their accountability is measured through their portfolio called the pastee. That is set on a metric of 8 standards that they are to incorporate artifacts from multiple sources that include student surveys, observations, academic goal setting forms, etc. They are graded on a 4-point scale: exemplary, proficient, needs improvement, and unsatisfactory. Intelligent accountability is one that was interesting to me because I'm going to read the definition. Is intelligent accountability is transparent, focuses on helping schools, increases individual and collective capacity building, involves shared responsibility and is interventionist in only extreme cases of need. External and internal accountability seem almost seamless. This was interesting primarily because of the concept of shared responsibility. There's a lot of discussion in both the media and in policy about how best to hold the teachers and schools accountable for success. The shared responsibility and intelligent accountability indicates that there is not much said about holding policymakers and educational leaders accountable. It seems that these policymakers have pushed accountability downward while absolving themselves of being held accountable for fulfilling their role in achieving academic success in schools. This is a quotation that I found through research that I had gotten through Ellison. The foundation for achieving the goals of preparing students for the intellectual rigors of the 21st century economy begins with a recommitment to public schooling as a public institution in which all share responsibility and in which accountability measures are centered around the ballot box.